No spoilers ahead. I'm Johnny. Welcome to my house of horrors.
The first horror movie I ever watched was The Evil Dead, and if you want to know how long ago that was, I watched it from home on a VCR that had wood on the sides of it. As a result, I was desensitized to a lot of scary concepts at a young age. It probably goes without saying, one of those concepts was the cabin in the woods. So, when the actual Cabin in the Woods trailer came out in 2012, all I saw was another Evil Dead wannabe. So I relegated it to the to-be-watched later pile. Obviously, at that time, I was ignorant to the irony of my attitude.
His name is Robert Paulson. This is over with. His name is Robert Paulson.
And if you're not in on the joke of this movie yet, allow me to explain. The movie opens with a conversation between Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford's characters, and it's so uninteresting and far removed from your image of a Cabin in the Woods horror intro that a lot of moviegoers believe they'd sat down in the wrong theater. The atmosphere is clinical, there's no color anywhere, and it stays that way for an agonizing 2 minutes and 45 seconds, until an abrupt red logo revealed that I might have stolen from my own intro today. On its surface, and for the most part in its advertising, the movie's about a group of mind-numbingly typical youngins heading to a cabin in the woods for the weekend. And if that wasn't enough to make you get up off your fuzzy brown upholstered couch to walk over to hit eject on the old VCR, we didn't have remote controls back then. When the characters are in the cabin, they are straight-up archetypes. Kurt's an action hero, Dana's the virgin, Jules is the naughty girl, Holden's the mature one, and the comic relief's a guy called Marty. Notice I said once they're in the cabin. They don't start out as archetypes. Remember that. On the drive up, they even pull into the requisite last gas station to meet my favorite harbinger of horror, Tim DeZarn. And in true Tim fashion, he harbingers the fuck out of it. And in true horror trope fashion, they ignore his ominous tone and just keep on trucking. When they finally pull into the cabin, it is remarkably unremarkable. And that's by design, just like everything else that's about to happen. You see, this particular cabin does not do what it says on the tin. But I assure you, after the penny drops, you're not going to be asking for your money back. Because this cabin's more of a controlled environment than an actual cabin in the woods. Everything that happens inside is monitored and orchestrated by the people you saw in the intro. And that huge government-looking Dr. Evil's lair facility, it's right under the cabin. And I know you're thinking, wow, Johnny, you were totally right. My expectations have been completely subverted. To which I reply, sit your ass back down and pay attention. We're just getting started. While our attractive archetypes are going through the motions of the first layer of this plot, things down in the control room are a lot more serious, and for good reason. In a nutshell, a collection of demonic entities known as the Ancient Ones, who used to walk around killing people and destroying things, are currently imprisoned deep below the surface of the earth. Why do they stay there, you ask? Because we offer them ritualistic sacrifices, obviously. For ages and ages, the Ancient Ones were content with the blood of animals and the occasional virgin being buried alive in their honor. But much like we human beings, the novelty of these things eventually dies off. And now the Ancient Ones insist on something spectacular. And this is where the second layer of the movie comes in. Enter the control room. Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford's characters are in charge of loads of technicians, whose job is to ensure the sacrifices are killed in a gruesome and entertaining fashion, and in a specific order. They have to get the characters into the cabin, and once they're there, they flood the place with pheromones so they all make stupid choices. And the consequences of those stupid choices is a violent death at the hands of whichever horror tropes they've unleashed. And the horror trope they unleash is determined by which item in the cellar they end up using to summon them. Simple, right? If everything goes to plan, the victim's sacrificial blood is sent down to the Ancient Ones, satisfying them for the time being, and life can go on. But if something goes wrong, it's the end of the world. The movie's a constant back and forth between the control room plot and the slasher plot in the cabin, and the contrast between the two of them creates a very unique voyeuristic tone. While the archetypes in the cabin are getting slashed to bits one by one on the monitors, there's a literal office party going on in the control room. These rituals have become so routine to this collection of people that they're completely blasé about it. Orchestrating and recording the slaughter of innocent people to appease the Ancient Ones is literally their day job. When each of the archetypes end up dying in the necessary order, the control room celebrates their victory. That is, until a phone call comes down from the director, telling them Marty, the funny one, has actually survived his ordeal. This obviously throws the ritual on its ass, and the control room descends into a frenzied panic. Marty finds Dana, and the two of them head below to figure out what the hell's going on. While they're doing that, the control room is trying desperately to find them so security can kill Marty. Remember, they have to die in a certain order, and the ritual says Marty has to die before Dana, the virgin, or else they've failed. But before they've a chance to fix things, Marty and Dana find a purge button, and pressing it releases every horror movie monster trope you've ever seen into the control room, and literal hell breaks loose. Up until now, we've talked about the slasher plot and the control room plot, but there's been a third plot running silently below those two the entire time, like some wickedly dark, intelligent river. Let me explain. Maybe calling it a third plot wasn't entirely accurate. How about this instead? If you combine the cabin slasher plot and the control room plot, and you take a few steps back from it and allow your eyes to adjust, you'll see a metaphorical plot that ends up to way more than the sum of its parts. Enough of me trying to sound intelligent. Let's spell it out. To summarize, the control room has to appease the Ancient Ones by orchestrating the violent slaughter of the archetypes, or else the Ancient Ones will bring about the end of the world. We've been focusing on three elements: the archetypal characters, the control room, and the Ancient Ones. Let's keep the ritualistic tone, and we'll address them one at a time in sequence. I pointed out earlier the archetypes didn't start out as archetypes, and if you paid attention during their opening scene, you'd see they're basically the opposite of what they become when they started recording them in the cabin. It's the people in the control room that ultimately manipulate the characters into becoming their archetypes using underhanded tactics like pheromone mists. At one point, this is even acknowledged by Marty, who's immune to the control room tactics. He simply states,
"We are not who we are."
As I also commented, these rituals have become so routine to the control room staff that they've become desensitized to the horrific violence they're inflicting on the archetypes. The entire thing has just become work to them. And finally, I talked about the Ancient Ones and the ritual itself. In a cameo at the end of the movie, Sigourney Weaver explains the concept in full detail to Marty and Dana. She's the control room director. She tells them as long as the ritual's adhered to, the Ancient Ones are fine. But if the formula's messed with even a bit, they'll rise up and the world will end. And this is the point when you need to stand back and let your eyes adjust. Sigourney's the director. She tells Marty, as an archetype, that he can refuse to go along with things and die with everyone else, or he can kneel to the ritual and die for everyone else. Essentially, she's asking him to sacrifice himself to keep the ritual intact. And what you're actually watching in this scene is a movie director explaining to an actor that if they don't go along with their on-screen gruesome kills, if they deviate from what the Ancient Ones demand, the movie will flop, spelling the death of everyone in the control room, who represent a film crew, led by Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford's characters, who represent Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon, the director and the writer, respectively, of this Cabin in the Woods movie. And the Ancient Ones? I'm sure you figured it out by now. It's me. And it's you. Horror actors become archetypes the moment they show up on set, or enter the cabin in this case. The writers and producers and directors all want to express themselves creatively, but when they deviate from horror movie formulas, the movies don't make money. So their creativity has to take a back seat. They end up losing enthusiasm and become blasé about orchestrating and recording the gruesome deaths of their actors. And finally, we, the Ancient Ones, who used to be terrified by films like Psycho and Rosemary's Baby, have become so numb to subtlety that we demand more blood and more guts in brighter colors and with splashier sounds. And when we don't get it, we flock to our keyboards and destroy entire projects with a few clicks. Or we start YouTube channels and convince ourselves that these directors and writers need to up their games to satiate our insatiable horror appetites. Now, I know this video is heavy with spoilers, but I've intentionally steered clear of referencing dialogue wherever I can. And I've done this so you can go back in and watch the movie again with this new perspective. I can't emphasize enough how different every conversation is outside the cabin when you have this knowledge. Having said that, I want to refer you to a short metaphorical conversation between one of the control room staff and Alex Truman, the new head of security. When he's looking astounded by everything going on around him, she simply says,
"You get used to it."
To which he replies,
Should you?
Alex is asking in his best metaphorical accent, is this the way the horror industry should proceed? Should we keep on pushing in this unsustainable direction? I'm going to leave that question with you because the answer could change horror movies and the way you interact with them from here on. Till next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!